If you love terrifying small-town dread and mysteries that refuse to let go, you need these 10 brilliant thrillers queued up right now, ranging from rural isolation to suburban rot. Welcome back to Screen Curator. We begin our journey into the heart of suburban darkness with Denis Villeneuve's staggering thriller, Prisoners. This film does not just build tension, it traps you in a freezing gray Pennsylvania autumn and slowly starves you of oxygen. The nightmare starts on Thanksgiving, when two young girls vanish from their quiet neighborhood, leaving behind only a lingering sense of dread and a dilapidated RV. When the lead detective, played with a twitchy, obsessive brilliance by Jake Gyllenhaal, is forced to release the prime suspect due to a lack of physical evidence. A desperate father chooses a terrifying path. Hugh Jackman gives a career-defining performance of raw, jagged grief as Keller Dover, a man who takes the suspect hostage in an abandoned building to extract the truth through sheer desperate force. What makes Prisoners an absolute masterclass is how Roger Deakins' icy, rain-slicked cinematography mirrors the moral decay of its characters, casting long shadows over their desperate choices. It is a grueling, beautifully shot puzzle box that asks a haunting question. How far into the dark can you walk before you become the monster you are hunting? If you crave twisted mysteries that rattle your soul, this is your next obsession. At number 9, we plunge into the cold, gray waters of Clint Eastwood's masterpiece, Mystic River. This is a story about how a single, devastating moment in childhood can shadow a neighborhood for decades. 3 boys, Jimmy, Sean, and Dave, are writing their names in wet cement when a car pulls up and a fake police officer steals one of them away. Years later, that stolen boy, now grown and played with shivering vulnerability by Tim Robbins, comes home covered in blood on the very night Jimmy's teenage daughter is brutally murdered. Sean, now a detective, is assigned to the case, while Jimmy, played with raw, grief-stricken fury by Sean Penn, begins his own bloody hunt for answers. What makes this film so devastating is the atmosphere of absolute claustrophobic dread. Clint Eastwood, who also composed the film's mournful, sparse musical score, wraps this blue-collar Boston community in a heavy fog of suspicion where everyone has known each other too long and ancient secrets are buried beneath the floorboards. It is a tragedy masquerading as a procedural, a gripping mystery that forces you to watch 3 friends break under the weight of shared history. If you want a thriller that values human wreckage over simple puzzle solving, this is a masterpiece that demands your attention. For our 8th spot, we are turning our eyes to the frostbitten hills of the Ozarks with Deborah Granick's masterpiece, Winter's Bone. 17-year-old Ree Dolly, played in a star-making turn by Jennifer Lawrence, is caring for her young siblings and catatonic mother in a desolate, decaying valley. When the local sheriff arrives with the devastating news that her missing, meth-cooking father has put up their family home as collateral for his bail, Ree is given a choice: find him, prove he is dead, or watch her family get evicted into the freezing cold. What makes this journey so gripping is that the monster isn't hiding in the woods, it is woven into the very fabric of her community. To save her family, Ree must confront her own bloodline, a clannish, hostile network of relatives bound by a terrifying code of silence. Granick spent months living with Missouri locals, casting them to ground this thriller in a raw, hyper-realistic poverty that feels entirely authentic. It is a slow burn mystery where every cold look, chainsaw buzz, and whispered threat feels dangerously real, making it a perfect match for anyone seeking a survival story stripped of Hollywood gloss. For our 7th spot, we are turning to a modern masterpiece of cosmic dread, The Empty Man. The film begins with a staggering 22-minute prologue in the snowy peaks of Bhutan, before dropping us into a damp, gray Midwestern town where a grieving ex-cop investigates a missing teenager. What starts as a local urban legend, the ritual of blowing into an empty bottle on a bridge at night, spirals into a terrifying encounter with a sprawling nihilistic cult known as the Pontifex Institute. Directed by David Pryor, a protege of David Fincher, this film behaves less like a standard jump-scare horror movie and more like a cold clinical procedural. It replaces cheap, formulaic thrills with a suffocating low-light atmosphere shot on specialized anamorphic lenses and an unsettling industrial ambient score by Pioneer Lustmord. If you crave brainy mysteries that slowly rot from the inside out, where the dread isn't just lurking in the shadows but infects the very sanity of the local community like a contagion, this is your next obsession. It is a massive, patient, and deeply atmospheric nightmare that respects your intelligence, building a labyrinth of terror that will absolutely consume you. Dropping into the number 6 spot is a masterclass in slow burn grief and quiet terror, the Australian masterpiece Lake Mungo. Presented as a hauntingly authentic pseudo-documentary, the film follows a family in the rural town of Ararat trying to survive the aftermath of their 16-year-old daughter Alice's sudden drowning. But this is no standard supernatural thriller. As her brother sets up video cameras to capture what they believe is her lingering spirit, the footage uncovers cryptic digital artifacts, grainy phone videos, and hidden diaries, suggesting Alice was harboring deeply disturbing secrets. Director Joel Anderson, who made this his sole feature film before vanishing from the industry, had his low-profile actors completely improvise their emotional sit-down interviews. This realistic approach produces a devastatingly intimate experience where the dread doesn't come from loud jump scares, but from the unbearable act of zooming into the background of a blurry family photograph and discovering something impossible staring back at you. If you crave a mystery that eschews flashy theatrics for an icy, lingering dread that settles deep into your bones, this quiet nightmare is your next essential viewing experience. At number 5 on our list, we find ourselves stepping directly onto the pristine, emerald green lawns of Lumberton in David Lynch's masterpiece Blue Velvet. The nightmare begins not with a monster in the dark, but with a young man finding a severed, ant-infested human ear discarded in a vacant lot. This single grotesque discovery pulls our collegiate protagonist into a neon-drenched underworld operating right beneath the nose of his polite, white picket fence suburb. Lynch masterfully weaponizes nostalgia, contrasting the cheerful wave of a local fireman with the low rumbling drone of insects hiding under manicured lawns. You are thrust into a claustrophobic voyeurism, trapped alongside Jeffrey as he witnesses Dennis Hopper's terrifying, oxygen-huffing Frank Booth rule over a landscape of cabaret singers and deep-seated perversion. It is a film that uses the haunting croon of Roy Orbison to warp your sense of safety, ensuring you will never look at your neighbors the same way again. If you crave mysteries that feel like waking dreams, where the danger is intimate and the dread is thick enough to breathe, this is the ultimate descent into suburban rot. Stepping into our number 4 spot is the undisputed masterpiece of pagan paranoia, 1973's The Wicker Man. We follow a deeply religious, straight-laced police sergeant who flies to a remote Scottish island to investigate a report of a missing schoolgirl. What he finds is a community that doesn't just deny her existence, but actively mocks his rigid morality with open-air pagan rituals, fertility dances, and eerie, cheerful folk songs. The absolute genius of this film is how it weaponizes hospitality. There are no dark corridors or standard monsters. Instead, the terror of Summerall is bathed in bright, deceptive spring sunlight, so deceptive that the cold autumn shoot forced actors to suck on ice cubes between takes to hide their freezing breath. Christopher Lee, who loved this script so much he starred for free, delivers a towering performance of aristocratic, charismatic menace. This is the ultimate blueprint for folk horror, where an entire town acts as a singular, smiling antagonist. If you want a slow-burn mystery that relies on psychological gaslighting and a mounting sense of inescapable dread, this sunlit nightmare belongs at the very top of your watch list. Arriving at number 3 on our countdown is Bong Joon-ho's sophomore masterpiece, Memories of Murder. Set in 1986 amidst the rain-drenched fields of Gyeonggi Province, the film plunges us into the bleak reality of South Korea's first documented serial killer. It begins not with a grand cinematic flourish, but with a horrifying discovery, a young woman's body discarded in a concrete drainage ditch, swarming with insects under the autumn sun. As more victims are found bound with their own clothing on rainy nights, the investigation devolves into absolute chaos. Bong pits the primitive, brutal instincts of the local detectives, who prefer beating confessions out of suspects, against a meticulous investigator sent from Seoul who relies on forensic logic. The result is a muddy, atmospheric descent into pure frustration. Cinematographer Kim Hyung-koo strips the landscape of vibrant colors, leaving us with a suffocating palette of wet earth, yellow fields, and gray skies. It is a haunting, deeply human portrait of a community losing its innocence to an invisible monster. If you want a mystery that prioritizes psychological weight and thick, inescapable dread over easy Hollywood resolutions, this is the gold standard. For our penultimate entry, we are tuning into the analog frequency of Andrew Patterson's astonishing debut, The Vast of Night. It is a chilly autumn evening in 1950s New Mexico, and while nearly the entire town is packed inside a high school gymnasium for a basketball game, a young switchboard operator and a charismatic radio DJ are left alone with the static. When a bizarre, rhythmic audio pulse interrupts their switchboard lines, they begin tracing a signal that feels less like a technical glitch and more like a warning. What follows is a beautifully paced mystery told through hushed telephone conversations, anonymous late-night callers, and a town slowly realizing it is not alone. Patterson delivers a masterclass in auditory suspense, trading loud jump scares for the hypnotic pull of overlapping dialogue and a legendary, unbroken camera shot that glides through empty streets on a modified go-kart. It captures that rare brand of late-night paranoia where the dark is a living presence waiting to swallow you whole. If you crave stories where cosmic dread whispers through the telephone wire, this micro-budget triumph demands to be heard. At the absolute summit of our list is Gone Baby Gone, a towering masterpiece of local dread that stands as Ben Affleck's directorial debut. The film plunges us directly into the concrete heat of Dorchester, Boston. Not the glossy Hollywood version, but a neighborhood populated by actual local residents who bring an unvarnished, aching authenticity to every frame. When 4-year-old Amanda McCready vanishes from her bed, her neglectful mother's panic turns the tight-knit community into a volatile pressure cooker. We follow 2 young, neighborhood-bred private investigators, Patrick Kenzie and Angie Gennaro, hired because they know how to navigate these fiercely guarded streets. But as they trace the girl's disappearance through local drug dens, stolen cartel money, and systemic police corruption, the investigation morphs into an agonizing crucible. This is a thriller where every shadow feels heavy and every street corner feels like a confession. It is not just about finding a missing child. It is about the unbearable weight of an ethical choice that will leave you questioning your own sense of justice long after the credits roll. If you crave a mystery that values raw human cost over clean resolutions, this is the ultimate cinematic destination. Because once a small town buries its secrets, they don't just stay quiet, start warping the reality of everyone left standing. If those claustrophobic mysteries broke your brain, you're not ready for the 20 psychological thrillers waiting for you right now on screen. Click it and let's go.